Welcome, everybody, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney, and I'm thrilled today to be back in the studio with one of the most interesting, fun, great people to work with, and that is Erica Petrelli-Bayh. Many of you know her. She was the winner, by the way, of our 100th episode podcast best tip that she brought in. If you did not listen to that one, you'll get to hear more of her, but she's a regular facilitator for us. She's worked with hundreds and hundreds of companies, thousands and thousands of people. She's one of the best managers I've ever seen. And a little side note, which makes it interesting for today's conversation to me personally, is she was really the first person in our office as a team to start working remotely. And so she was the first example way before COVID or anything, where she kind of had to be a pioneer on this path of remote work and also figuring out how to continue to make connection with all of us and all of her coworkers, all of her direct reports, all of her colleagues in a time where the internet was much less than it is today. In terms of what it could do. But with that, I just want to kind of bring you a little bit into what our topic is today. So I want everybody out there, to think about the last time you felt truly connected at work. Not just productive, not just efficient, but really seen, really heard, really part of something, where you felt that your presence there made a big difference in terms of what the outcomes were. Now you have that thought hopefully in mind. Hopefully you could think of something. Now think about how much of your work today happens through screens, through systems, through increasingly an AI world. And there's a lot of good with that. I am 100% an advocate for using AI to make our lives easier, our jobs easier. But we are starting to feel a little bit of this friction or fear, right? We're living in this moment where technology is accelerating everything, our speed, our output, our access. But there's one thing that we know we can't replicate yet, and that's the feeling of being understood by another human being. Although I do think that my Claude and my ChatGPT try to understand me pretty well, but it is something quite different when it's human, right? So here's the tension that we keep coming back to. As AI gets better, and it does, it keeps getting better at doing our work, the human part of our work becomes even more valuable, right? That's what we're hearing. We're hearing that people need, the better that their paperwork gets and the way that they look on the page, people don't quite trust it. They want to see who you are, who you show up in real life. And so what we want to talk about is, are we investing enough in that at the same pace that we're investing in AI? Are we investing in how we intentionally design our connections? So I am joined by Erica Petrelli-Bayh, who brings such a thoughtful perspective on how we show up, how we connect, how we stand out, especially in increasingly digital and remote environments. So this conversation is about more than connection, though. It's about influence, it's about trust, and what it actually takes to lead and collaborate in a world where efficiency is rising, but belonging might be a little bit at risk. And we're going to try to help that. So, hi, Erica.
Hi, so good. So good. Such a great topic for right now.
So let's just get your frame for it. Like, when you think about the rise of AI and remote work, where do you see connection maybe getting lost the most?
Yeah, it's such an interesting one. And I think there's not an easy answer, and it's not cut and dry or black and white. This is right and this is wrong. This is good and this is bad. So that in and of itself is frustrating for a lot of people. It can be tempting or easy to say, for example, AI is bad, remote work is less effective. And I just don't think that that's true. I think there's a lot of nuances. And I think with intentionality, remote work, for example, can be as connecting and as impactful as in person. You just might have to work a little harder. You have to be more creative. And again, like I said, you have to be intentional with those connections that in the office might come without even any thought because you run into each other. For example, AI is something that can be a helpful and powerful companion to work that you're already doing. But if you let it do the work for you, then it does a disservice to your work and drives disconnection because people don't trust the content that you're putting out because they've lost you in it. So I think we're navigating really complex times where there's neither good nor bad. There's just a greater need for intentional, thoughtful, careful connection and effort.
Yeah. That's such a good point. I have so many things that I want to ask you about based on that, but before we get there, because I just don't want to start on the negative of like what people are losing, what are you noticing in leaders or teams that you work with who are getting this right? What are you noticing about them?
Well, specific to remote connection as an example or AI, do you care where we start or both? Yes,
No, go
all of
ahead.
it?
Yeah, both. Whatever you think, whatever
Well, I mean,
floats your boat. We have a
the
lot of people out there who listen who do work either hybrid or remotely, and so I think it is helpful for them, but then we also have obviously everybody's at different points in their AI journey, right?
yeah,
Some people are just getting on, some people are like way beyond. They're creating, bots that are doing, basically assistance for them in their life.
yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, I mean, I think that there is the short answer here that the leaders that are doing it well or the teams that are thriving in this uncertainty are the ones that are embracing it as this is the way. And there's a lot of opportunity as opposed to what you just said is as opposed to immediately jumping to, well, this is terrible. This is obviously a problem. And so let's fix the problem with it. So they move right into that mode and that drives the very thing they're trying to avoid, which is disconnection and distrust. So the leaders that are doing it well, let's say in the remote or hybrid landscape, are saying, aha, here's a greater opportunity to get the most out of my entire team because I can be more flexible than I've ever been before in terms of their needs, their geographical location, different scheduling situations. We can actually flex in a way that we couldn't do before the remote landscape was so prevalent, and we can maximize each individual team member's productivity, therefore benefiting the company. The other thing that they're doing well is understanding that remote connection, so a remote meeting, a remote one-on-one, must have the same kind of dynamic that an in-person meeting would have. At an in-person meeting, you're going to start with some casual chit chat and connecting. You might have some music playing. You're going to have these human connection moments that the leaders that are doing it well remotely remember that those elements are really important. So they're going to infuse those in the remote landscape too. As opposed to somebody that's not doing it as well says, we're hopping on a Zoom. Let's get down to business. A, B, C, D. Who cares about your cameras? See y'all later. And then you're like, well, that didn't feel good at all and probably could have just been an email. But why did we have to even meet if we weren't going to connect or see each other? So it's in that arena of utilizing it as it's just another way to be together, but we're still intentionally being together. So let's make sure we're tending to that part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, when you say that, I feel immediately guilty, right? Because we all do
We all
versions of
are.
that because we're busy people and we're like, okay, let's just we kind of prioritize efficiency over connection
Yeah,
often,
I
right?
agree.
Often.
And I think that might be fine in the short term. I think it is to the detriment in the long term.
Mm,
Because one or two instances of we're just moving fast and getting stuff done is fine and to be expected in our lives, but repeatedly you start to lose any sort of greater why am I connected to this person, why am I connected to this organization, what I'm doing matter at all, and that kind of sort of silo feeling can lead to isolation or disconnection in a way that's what I think is a contributing factor to people leaving or maybe their productivity diminishing to just enough to get by. What's the bare minimum I can do to be seen as doing my job well?
yeah. It's interesting if we stay on this idea of remote work, right? It's interesting because some people are doubling down on that and going completely remotely, saving money on office space or whatever, right? And having their employees work remotely. Others, especially I've noticed a big uptake in the past year, but with a lot of companies are completely bringing employees back to work, right? Or at least it requiring them to be in the office 4 days a week or sometimes 3 days a week now, where that wasn't the case before. And why do you think that leaders are opting for that? Why, what do you think might be that? I know we don't have any
I don't
research
I don't
of
have
our
a
own, but
crystal
like, what do you
ball.
think?
But I think one thing that can happen is a leader can, it's a version of panicking, right? How we were successful in the past was we worked in a thriving office and there was a lot of energy and activity. And that model is familiar and has been familiar for decades and decades and decades. And so I want to get back to that known, that comfortable known, a time when we were all in the office and we were productive and profitable and successful, whatever that looks like. So I think it's a default mechanism to say that worked in the past, so that's what we need to do now, which I think is potentially a mistake. It's at the very least, I would say pause and make sure you're thoughtfully considering why you're calling everyone back. Are you calling everyone back because the team works in such collaborative ways that they actually have to be together in the majority of their tasks and projects, in which case being in the same room is effective because I need to talk to you and then go talk to that person, and all of the work drives via collaboration and connection. In those instances, it probably does make sense for a lot
Yeah.
of time in the office. However, if I'm a company where there's a lot of independent work, these things maybe once a week or even once a month we connect. Do they really need to be in the office 3 days a week, or does it just feel comfortable to me as the leader to see them? I would invite the latter to leaders to give maybe second thought to why. What's the greater why? If it's driving productivity in a real way, not in a perceived way, if it's driving productivity in that where we need to work together, so we need to be in conversation, then yes, it makes sense to start to shift back to the in-person model. What COVID did was give us the opportunity to blow that old model up entirely. That was no longer an option. And so, it's always good when old options are taken away from us. We can just go back to the old way when the old way returns as an option. Or we can use it as an opportunity to say, I didn't even think we could function without that old model, but look at what we just did in crisis. Now it's a clean slate. What would I craft in the ideal model? And that's why I think there's a lot of hybrid. So I think,
That's right.
anyway, I think whatever, there's no right or wrong answer, but the wrong way to find your answer is just a default to what's known.
All right. So a lot of people can't control this, right? So a lot of people
Yeah.
that are listening, they're not the decision makers in
Yeah.
it, but they can control how they connect. And so what's your advice? And let's just stay right now with this idea of either remote or hybrid work. What's your advice for making your connection as strong as possible? In that when you're looking at people maybe through a screen or you don't see them as much, how do you make up for that? How do you get that human connection there?
Yeah.
What are some things?
This is really an important question because it does require extra in the remote or hybrid environment. When you're in separate spaces, you can't rely on we're in the same proximity so we feel connected, or we walk past each other so we say hello, or I inquire about your children, whatever it might be. And so it absolutely on both ends. So if you're the leader and you have a direct report that's somewhere 2 states away, it requires it on you, and the worker that's 2 states away, it requires it on their end too. So it's not just anybody's job, it's everybody's job to be extra communicative. So that might look like things that you would never think to do in an in-person office setting. Sending a good morning email just to check, or a direct message if you're on Teams or whatever it is, just to, hey, good morning. How's your day? Hey, it's a beautiful day. Good morning. It's that thoughtfulness of, let me check in with this person on a random Wednesday. How's the week going? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Do you need anything? So it's pausing to say, what are the things that would normally happen without me thinking about it? And let me actually pick up the phone or DM or email to do those things. If you're a remote worker and you're feeling a little bit like, what's going on? It requires you to check in with your supervisor to say, hey, I want to make sure I'm in the loop. Hey, let me know if I can join this meeting. So it requires that extra communication and a little bit of extra advocacy,
Yeah.
because out of sight, out of mind is a real phenomenon that is not malicious at all most of the time, right? Out of sight, out of mind is just we're all very busy and we are running through our day and running through our tasks, and we forget to be as thoughtful as we should be in the remote landscape. So putting it on your calendar as a meeting, or, that kind of block time of checking in with your remote staff, whatever tricks that you can do to make sure that it becomes part of your intentional activity, I think is really important, because there is
Yeah,
a
some
good
people
danger.
use, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but some people use like Slack, for instance, or right, and or other versions of things that are like Slack, and that's a great way too, just to be on there, like instead of it constantly being just like work questions or things,
Yeah.
just to take a moment to share something about
Yes.
yourself. Or there's a lot of people, as I say this, that I know are like, oh God, don't do that, because they feel like their Slack channels are already so full. But it is important. I've gotten those email messages from you in the past,
Yeah.
and it is nice. Another thing you reminded me of is that, I have a woman that works for me, and it's so nice because she is remote, and when she sends me, she'll regularly send me like, this is what I'm working on this week. Here's what I need from you. Oh my God, it's so refreshing, right? Because
Yes.
we are all busy and we all are
Yeah.
doing these things, and I think when the person is not in front of you all the time, it's very easy to get wrapped up in the game of eternal whack-a-mole that we're playing with all the other things we have to do, right?
Yeah.
The
That's a
other thing I
great best
noticed,
practice.
right?
Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I might
Yeah.
need help with. Just letting you know, so you don't have to ask for it, and they can feel like they're proactively keeping you up to date. That's a really good one.
Yeah, and just as it also just makes me relax, like, okay, yeah, she's working, she's
Yeah.
pushing things forward, that I don't have to be worried about this. And so it frees up some of my control,
Yes.
those centers in your brain that give you a little bit of anxiety around, like, is this happening? That's
Yeah.
kind of quietly in the background, that can take up a lot of stress, or, help sleep at, you think about it right before you go to bed or something. The other thing I thought was interesting that some of our folks did on our team, and they just kind of reinvigorated it recently, is they call it on Fridays, they do what they call a morning mix.
Mm.
And somebody puts it up there. It's not run by anybody's boss or anything. It's just open to everybody in the company. Anybody can come or not come. They get on there and they say hello and they share things inevitably, like, whatever's happening in life. But they also, work stuff comes up regularly. When I've gone on to those, I'm like, oh, that was good. I showed up to that, because you don't know what's going to get
Yes.
created by who's ever in the room. It really is that, from that Hamilton quote, being in the room where it matters, is
Yeah.
very important. And when they do that morning mix, it's like an hour, and they all are working on other things. So it's not like they're just sitting there waiting for somebody to do something. Like, they're all working, but they have their cameras open, and they're just also
Mm.
connecting as we used to do in an open plan office, kind of between the cubicles.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I thought of when you said, that showing up is so valuable. There's a Harvard Business Review HBR article that I was looking at again, talking about the new version of executive presence.
Mm.
And one of the things that is new in the past 5 years or so is this idea of showing up. And whether that's turning your cameras on,
Yeah.
or whether that's being in the room, that people know you're there. And that is something that they didn't used to define as something that was important in executive presence. It used to be like, you're really tall, or you're whatever, like you have a deep
You have a
voice, like
powerful
all the,
presence. Yeah.
yeah, the way you dress, but now it's like, no, are you turning your camera
Present.
on? Your press, yeah, exactly. So I thought that was interesting, because even we know a guy, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about when I say this, but I won't say his name, but um we work in a lot of different schools in the city, and it always cracked me up because I would sometimes tag along with him to some of these schools, and I knew his schedule. So he maybe had, 6, 8 schools that he worked with, but he would go in, or more, he would go into those schools and they would think he worked there full time, because he would be like, make such a big presence out of his one afternoon there, that he would know everybody's names, from the security guards to the admin assistants to the teachers. He'd give high fives, whatever. They thought he had a desk somewhere in that building. They just didn't know where it was. And I just thought, oh my God, how, and I watched it happen and I thought, this is interesting. And then it happened in the next place and the next place. And I thought, what an interesting way to make connection so intentional, so quick, so big that you can kind of make up for time.
Yes.
Really incredible.
It's so important. I think we just continuously underestimate the power of that kind of simple connection. Knowing the name, knowing something about their life, just taking that moment to inquire about their day. Especially in the face of extraordinary busyness in our schedules, we let that stuff go thinking, what difference could it possibly make? I always say that, people say, oh, what difference could it possibly make that I ask about your day or ask about how your child's doing at college or whatever it might be. And then you watch someone like that who knows enough and takes the time, and you see the power of that. You see how those small moments added up ripple to incredible executive presence and the power of feeling. You and I talk a lot about the power of and the importance of feeling seen, heard, and valued in any relationship. But when we talk about cultivating impactful workplaces, we are talking about leaders who know to make their staff feel seen, heard, and valued. And every day and every week and every month, every quarter are looking at, what am I doing to make that so? And it's not a small measure to start by turning on your camera or asking about your recent surgery or whatever it might be. That, those add up to big results.
Okay, so I love these practical tools, right? So she's giving us some quick connection habits, so to speak, that people can start using immediately. So one is, if you don't have your camera on, figure out a way that you can get your camera on. You can blur out your background, all these things now. These are baby steps to connection. But what are a couple other quick connection habits, so to speak, that people can start using immediately?
Well, yes, turn your camera on, particularly if you're the leader. I mean, the rest of the staff, if they're not, have them just say in the chat. I was doing a workshop the other day, and a bunch of people, it just happened that it was during a lunch hour, essentially. So a bunch of people were like, so sorry, off camera, grabbing some soup or grabbing my lunch. That's wonderful because you're still engaging in the chat, but especially if you're the leader, for heaven's sake. Or if it's a one-on-one and there's just two of you, turn your cameras on. If you can't have your cameras on, reschedule it for a time when you can. Start all of your meetings with some kind of connection, whether it's a fun connecting question. We have a ton of those that we love, even just a kind of roses and thorns or highs and lows for the day. But make sure you start your meeting with a connection. Make sure you end your meeting with clear and tangible, here's what we decided, here's what I'm going to do, and here's what you're going to do. Here's what's happening next. It's those extras and bookending meetings with connecting first and making sure there's clarity at the end really helps people. You talked about that idea of your staff member who's always kind of proactively updating you, the ease that causes, even if it's an unconscious level of ease. There's not that nagging in the back of your brain. That's true for everyone. At the end of a meeting, they don't want to be leaving being like, is there something I'm supposed to be doing? So in the arena of meetings, there's a lot of impact you can have with very small tweaks in the way you handle your agenda. Handle your agenda, even if it's in your own mind, treat it with the respect. Even if it's a remote meeting, treat it with the respect that it deserves.
Yeah. Yeah, I always do this little trick for myself, and that I kind of figure out about how much money is at stake in this meeting in terms of just the people's time. And am I making it enough of value to make up for that time of pulling us together? And if the answer is no, I either need to cancel that meeting or I need to think about how am I going to do that. And sometimes just connecting, right, makes if people feel connected to your organization, they will also stay there longer.
Yes.
So that is valuable. It's just a matter of making time for that, right? Including, I'll just give a plug for your 52 Ways to Connect deck on Amazon that has 52 cards on good quick, fun check-ins. People always love that when I have that at keynote speeches I do. I give those away as contest prizes. So people love that. So let's shift a little bit away from remote work, although it's related, but let's talk a little bit about AI. And there's so many wonderful things that AI does for us now. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about agentic AI. I'm talking about whether you're using, Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT or any of the myriad of things. We're noticing that more and more people are using them to get their writing and their that kind of communication improved, right? And quicker. But what do you notice about how do we keep ourselves very human? I'll tell you a funny story. I was working with a client and they said they had all these interns, and they always give their interns every summer a project, and the interns came back to them with the most amazing written work on the project questions, right? Really deep insight, deep research. And he goes, this is a partner in the organization. And he says, listen, I read these papers that these interns turned, and I thought, oh my God, these are better than most of our, senior people. And he said, I called them in to be like, wow, we have a bunch of
You're
geniuses here. And
brilliant.
you're brilliant. So he brings them in. He goes, wow, this was so insightful. Like, tell me a little bit more about what you went into here, because this is interesting. The kids looked at each other and then looked at him and went, oh, we don't know what any of this means. What I love is that they were so honest. We don't know what any of this means. We
I
just
don't
went to
know what that
ChatGPT. And the partner was like, oh my God, you know nothing? And they're like, oh, we don't know any of it. That's why we're interns. So anyway, he looked at me and he goes, what the heck? Like, I can't have people like that fools you. And I said, yeah, our leadership is going to have to change, because in this world, you cannot always trust that the information that someone's putting out is what is a real indicator of what they actually digest. With many people, it is. With many people, they are just using it to pull together their own thoughts or pull together things. But in some cases, it could also be that. So how do we in this world keep human connection at the forefront, or, any thoughts on that?
So many thoughts. First, like even with I said with remote work, it's a futile and wasteful use of our energy to rally against and say this is such a terrible thing and we have to stop it because it's here and it's not going away. So it doesn't, I don't think it behooves us to be like, well, this evil thing. Instead, it's like, no, how are we going to work with it? So to your example, one very obvious place is if you're in the space of education, or in this case, like checking your intern's knowledge, writing is not the way to test that, because writing is going to oftentimes go through the funnel of AI. So if you want to test knowledge, you do that in conversation, and you do that in a critical thinking conversation, and you ask for personal experiences about. I have an online course that I am an instructor of, and that's always my thing of, I want to hear your personal stories, because I don't need you to recite or regurgitate textbook knowledge that you then funneled through AI just to tell me an answer that's correct. That's boring. Forget if it's actually, put aside for a moment that it's not helping you learn. It's just boring. What helps me see that you're digesting the information is that you're connecting it to personal stories, or telling me examples in your own life. And so I think in your partner's case, to get the interns in to be talking about personal experiences, asking questions, in the end, if you're trying to test knowledge, if you're trying to make a flashy, LinkedIn post or flyer, and you just want to sum up something, then sure, let the AI do the work. But even that, I don't know if you've found this to be true, but even that, I found people are being much too lazy, and they are forgetting. From my perspective, you use your artificial intelligence of choice as a creative companion, a brainstorming partner, a way to get bullets, to get, kind of a anchor, and then you put yourself in it. So you begin and you end in the mix. Like you're the start and you're the end. Your artificial intelligence might support you in the middle. And how many posts online, like I won't even read them, because I'm like, nope, it's entirely AI.
It's so true. LinkedIn is going to go down. If people don't start making their own posts,
Yeah.
I think LinkedIn is going to go the way of the dinosaur. That is my
Because it's
prediction.
so boring. You can tell from the start if somebody hasn't. I don't mind if, again, like, use it to support what you're trying to say. Absolutely. If you don't insert yourself in there, and there's so many tells nowadays that are just
My God, there's so many because it's all written the same way. People sound the same.
right. And they're so long. And so
Yeah.
what happens is I see that, I skip it. I don't even read it. And there might be something that's really valuable in there, but I missed it because it wasn't a human, and so I'm not connecting with it. So I think it's I don't think using artificial intelligence is a bad thing, and I don't think it matters if I did think it was a bad thing because it's here. And I think it's really important that, especially with our younger folks, that we are it's our responsibility to try to help ourselves, but also to help them understand to use their own critical thinking and discernment, to use their own voice and their own examples so that they're using it as a companion, not a replacement. Because otherwise, yeah, it's going to be less and less and less and less effective because people are like, no, thanks. I don't, this isn't you. So why should I care to read it?
I know. It's so true. I've been finding that. And I think that that's also true. I think LinkedIn is one place, and I'm starting to see people having the same kind of fatigue,
Yeah.
a little bit of AI fatigue in terms of like, if other bots are reading the work, great.
Yeah.
But the problem is we humans have to get through it. And so yeah, I think that's one thing. I think the other piece is even in the work that you do at work, how are you using your AI tools even to
Yeah.
make this more you?
Mm.
And how are you making sure that you're looking at it? I mean, I talked to somebody who they had to fire someone because it was a reviewer, and a reviewer did not clearly watch one of the shows it was supposed to watch.
Mm.
And there's some reader in some little town somewhere in the world that went, this person did not watch this show. There are things like that you have to understand, like that can happen
Yeah.
anywhere. And you really have to read what you write, even if it's at work, and because it can make up stuff, but also it is at the very least is it going to sound like you, and at the worst it can be wrong.
Right.
So I do think there are that's important.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it's not about tricking people. I think it's
No.
about how does this make people connect to you or not? Because right now, when I'll use LinkedIn as an example, when those LinkedIn posts went up, and I'm guilty of it too, I was like, this is fantastic. It wrote this great thing for me. And you put it up, and then you're like, this is wonderful. And then you start seeing the same version of things over and over and over again. And now it is no longer authentic to you.
That's right.
Right. And so I think the same thing is true at work. How do you authentically be you in whatever connection that is? And when is the right time to use AI to polish your stuff, to
Yeah.
make you think deeper? I thought it was interesting. You should be on the front and the end, and the
Yeah.
AI's in the middle. I almost think for me, and I happen to think this might have to do with your working genius, but for me, I sometimes like it on the beginning, and then I'll use it I'll be the person in the middle discerning it, changing it, stuff like that, and then put it back to them at the end for a polish, like, here,
Mm.
can you edit this? I think it depends on where you kind of come in. Are you the person who loves to come up with ideas? Are you the person who likes to discern them? Are you the person who likes to, get it down to bullets? How
Yeah.
can that AI help you in terms of where you are strong and where you need a little bit of help? But it should be you. I also
It's
think another way that you said, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, because you said that we can no longer use writing, even educators, as a way to know if someone,
yeah.
I don't even think they're going to do college essays anymore. I mean, I think that's going to go the way, because like,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be all video interviews,
Yeah.
just like, you know what I mean? It's going to be, and so we're all going to have to present a lot more our thoughts. And I think that's going to put more emphasis on in-person connection more than ever. And by in-person, it could also be remote, but you're
Yeah.
live in person talking. Any thoughts
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I mean, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if you're right. And I was thinking, even with writing, the writing has to happen in the classroom while you're
Hmm.
like in old-fashioned pen and paper sort of way. Just like, it's such a greater conversation than you and I have any ability to influence, but this idea of how much has to shift in old systems that simply no longer work with the reality of today. And so much in education is that. And again, in this case, instead of fighting or how many stories have you heard or maybe experienced yourself with the young people in your life of young people actually writing really great stuff and instructors accusing them of using AI and them not really having an ability to, it's a he said, she said. It's a very difficult moment on a lot of different ways. There's those of us that would put in writing that we didn't have anything to do with and let AI do all the work. And then when asked about it, I don't know anything about that. AI just did
Yeah.
it for me. And then on the other end of that extreme is I actually took a lot of time and thought in this essay, and it's so good that you're questioning whether I actually wrote it. And it's just a really murky area. So we can continue to fight that, or we can say written work is a tricky landscape. And so are there ways to do this differently? In person, conversation, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I talked to a leader yesterday. I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and he was telling me that he had a son who was in the workforce, and he was watching him work on some work for work on his laptop, and he was using all sorts of different AI tools and, going back and forth. And he said, he was retelling me the story, and he said, I told him, I said, stop this. This is crazy. You need to be able to do this stuff on your own. Like, you can't create these bots to do all this stuff. And the kid looked at him and goes, Dad, they want us to do this. They're requiring, it is part of a requirement of our job that we do this. And he was like, all right, what
Uh-huh.
do I know?
All right, go ahead.
And he looked at me, he goes, I got to get some training. And this guy is an owner. I mean, he owns the company, but his son doesn't work at his company. But I was just like, wow, fascinating, right? Because I do think that the best teachers, and we both work in education, like poor teachers, I mean, they really are having to learn this and are held to a much higher standard than anybody on how to do this. And the reality is that the teachers are an education system is going to have to understand that these kids are going to be required and already are required to use these tools in school. So let's start using them within education. But it's hard to do that in real time and still know that you're educating kids, right?
Yeah.
So
And it's funny as you're talking, I'm like, gosh, we've been talking about a version of this for decades, which
decades.
is not AI, but a version of this, which is we need to prepare our students for jobs that don't even exist right now. And that's
Hmm.
more true than
Hmm.
ever before. The jobs that they'll be doing are jobs that we can't even conceive of in our imagination, or the jobs that we've historically been training them for are jobs that will no longer be available because they're either done by AI or it's so rapidly changing. We've been talking about this
That's true.
as a reality for
When
decades.
the internet started.
When
Um,
any new thing, we're like, well, we gotta, and so, but I think the answer has always been and remains true that all of us, what we equip humans with is critical thinking and problem solving and collaboration and the ability to work in a team and the ability to have emotional intelligence, which funnily enough intersects us right back with the remote work conversation because it's not about the technical ability. So in this case, it's not about the technical ability to write a really good paragraph on my own without the help of Claude. It's about my ability to use discernment and to collaborate with humans. And so I think for educators, as much as is in their control, it's the same as with CEOs. Is how am I cultivating environment where my team or my class can utilize those skills, and how am I creating environments where those skills are fostered and I'm not judging them merely on the technical output, for example.
yeah. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So what are some, as we close up today, because this is obviously a huge topic that we got to keep coming back to, but I love where you just went there with it. How do we give people some quick tips on how to keep that human connection and make it just as strong? And you mentioned some bigger things in terms of, your emotional intelligence, in terms of critical thinking, in terms of like how you get along with people, some of those real team building skills.
Yeah.
What are some ways that people can grow that within their own organizations?
Well, I mean, that's think of the human first and the task second, always. And so, what does that mean for you might be different from what that means for me. But I think if you have that as your guiding question, am I thinking of the human first and not the task first? That's an automatic help because it helps me from getting too busy to remember those connecting moments. And so, and remember the larger why and the overarching goal that we're trying to achieve together, so that we have our eyes on the bigger purpose and picture, as opposed to, again, the like technical how are we getting there things. I mean, that's not a here's an immediate actionable thing, but I think that's an important point in this of how are we connecting as humans towards the greater why, and then getting to the nitty gritty and the logistics and how those get done second.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. I would say, I don't know how to do this quite yet, but I think it would be very interesting to look at how much time are you saving using these tools? And with that time savings, can you create some intentional time for human connection? So
Mm,
whether that's a check-in at the beginning of your day or at the end of your day, whether that's a difference in a meeting where you do it, an actual team building activity where people in real life have to do some of the things they talk about that they can do in their writing. So can they problem solve something? Can you teach them a decision making matrix? Can you
mm,
practice I was talking with a sales guy the other day, like, can you practice role playing
mm.
live in front of people? Can you do, some getting up and presenting? Because I do think that those skills are going to become more and more important within our organizations, and good opportunity to start practicing those now with the time we're saving with
Yeah,
all these
that's a really good idea,
bots and everything doing things for us. Erica, thank you so much for coming today. I really do
Christine.
appreciate you and how intentional you have been with me over the years in keeping yourself in front of me, talking about what you're working on, letting me see you, checking in on me, letting me know how your life is going, asking me about mine. It makes me still feel connected to you, even though we have worked apart from each other for over a decade, well over a decade now. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Christine.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for spending time here on Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you want to get anything more out of this, go to our YouTube channel and please subscribe to Leadership Lab TV. If you heard something today, of course, that resonated with you, do something with it. It's all about the choices that you make. It's what you say in conversations, how you show up in a moment. Share this episode with someone who's maybe starting a new job or stepping into a new level of leadership, and try one idea because it just might create some pretty powerful leadership ripple effects. Until next time, keep stepping in because the room changes when you do.